As we wind up January 2026, saying it has felt more like a year than a month is, I think, a sentiment that many people share. We've been enveloped in multiple gut-churning news stories, but two that have truly stood out. One was about a beloved mother of three gunned down by a federal agent in broad daylight. The other dealt with a respected ICU nurse, a life-saving professional, shot and killed while filming federal agents at work. These stories should break your heart. They should outrage you. If they don't, well, I suppose that's a whole nother conversation. But I hope that one thing we could all agree on is that they demand thorough investigation and then accountability. These two stories, however, were not the only ones where the ending was a death. If you look deeper, if you switch to smaller news outlets or Spanish-speaking publications or perhaps a local paper from El Paso or Philadelphia, you learn that these two deaths are just the tip of a much larger iceberg. There are others who died in ICE custody in the first weeks of 2026. Men from Honduras, from Cambodia, from Mexico, from Nicaragua. Some died suddenly, some died after medical crisis. One's death was ruled a homicide after an autopsy contradicted official explanations. And yet, ask your average American what they know about any of these other stories, and you'll probably get a blank stare. Today I want to talk about that silence. We're talking about whose life gets heard and whose doesn't. We're talking about how tragedy becomes a headline when a white woman is killed, but barely a footnote when someone from Honduras dies in custody. We're talking about what it means for justice, for humanity, and for this country's soul. Because if we only grieve the deaths we find similar to ours, the ones we find convenient, then we're already complicit in forgetting everyone else. And that's exactly what's happening right now. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another supplemental installment of Back Porch Files from your neighbor on the left, the podcast where we talk about liberal politics, human decency, and life on the blue side of America's ideological divide. My name is Don Spielis. I am your host. And today I want to talk about some of the people who have died during their involvement or their interactions with ICE. And not just the ones you're thinking about. Since 2026 has rolled in, it's felt like America has entered a grim new chapter of federal immigration enforcement. The news cycles have been dominated, understandably, by the heinous killings of Renée Nicole Good and Alex Pretti in Minneapolis. Renée, a mother of three and a community figure, was killed by a federal immigration agent during an operation described by officials as a domestic terrorism response. Alex, a veteran ICU nurse, was shot and killed just weeks later while documenting federal agents during a protest, with video footage raising serious questions about whether either of these two individuals ever posed a real threat. The deaths of both were captured and contested on camera, provoking outrage, protests, and demands for accountability across the country. But in all that national uproar, it's easy, and dangerously easy, to forget the other people who have died in connection with federal immigration enforcement just this year. As of right now, at least 8 people have died either at the hands of federal agents or while in immigration and customs enforcement custody. Their stories matter also. Their names matter. And they don't all fit into neat media narratives. Take Geraldo Lunas Campos, for example. He died on January 3rd in ICE custody at the Camp East Montana facility in El Paso, Texas. Initially, the Department of Homeland Security claimed that he had attempted suicide, but an autopsy later ruled his death a homicide, finding evidence that he died from asphyxia due to neck and torso compression while being restrained by guards, a finding that directly flew in the face of the official narrative. Witnesses said they heard him saying, "I can't breathe," as he was being restrained. Just 2 days after Campos' death, Luis Gustavo Nunez Cereces, a 42-year-old Honduran man, died in a hospital in Houston while in ICE custody. Authorities attributed his death to heart-related issues, but for his family and advocates, it raises familiar questions about the quality of medical care and the amount of oversight that happens in ICE detention. On January 6th, Luis Beltran Yanez Cruz, a 68-year-old man also from Honduras, died after being transferred to a California hospital from ICE detention. Official reports cited heart problems again, but families often face a grueling process to secure basic information and even harder choices about returning loved ones' bodies home. Then there was Pretti, a 46-year-old Cambodian refugee who died on January 9th at the Federal Detention Center in Philadelphia. Family members and advocates have pointed to severe drug withdrawal and a lack of timely medical care as contributing to his death, an all too common story in detention facilities where medical protocols are, at best, inconsistent. A few days later, on January 14th, Heber Sanchez Dominguez, a 34-year-old Mexican man, was found unresponsive in his cell at the Robert A. Dayton Detention Center in Georgia. ICE says the circumstances of his death are under investigation, but details are scarce as the public waits for a full accounting. That same day, at Camp East Montana, in El Paso again, Victor Manuel Diaz, a 36-year-old Nicaraguan detainee, was reported by ICE as having died by suicide. His family has publicly disputed that characterization, and independent scrutiny still continues. That group, Campos, Nunez Cereces, Yanez Cruz, Sanchez Dominguez, and Diaz, represent 6 deaths in ICE custody before we even get to the 2 people killed during enforcement actions by agents in Minneapolis. Combined, these tragedies paint a grim picture of the federal system that, despite its own oversight requirements, repeatedly seems to be failing to safeguard the basic health, safety, and dignity of the people it holds or targets. Here's the uncomfortable truth. When it comes to how we talk about who dies and why, race and visibility matter. The deaths of Renée Good and Alex Pretti made headlines in major outlets, dominated cable news, and galvanized national protests. Good was a well-known community member. Pretti was a U.S. citizen whose killing was caught on video. Their deaths are horrifying, and we should absolutely demand accountability for them. But what about the others? Guerrero in Texas, Nunez Cereces in Houston, Yanez Cruz in California, in Philadelphia, Sanchez Dominguez in Georgia, Diaz under disputed circumstances in Texas. These names are not trending on Twitter. Their deaths are not dominating cable news segments. Many mainstream national outlets treat them as almost footnotes if they report them at all. And yet every one of these deaths raises serious, systematic questions about ICE's detention conditions, medical care, restraint practices, and maybe most importantly, transparency. What does it say about us as a country when only the deaths that fit a certain narrative or happen in someone's hometown get our full attention? What does it say about justice if we only count the stories that include viral videos or sympathetic profiles? The law is supposed to treat every life equally. Every investigation should have equal scrutiny, and every family should be dealt with equal compassion. And yet, that ideal seems to consistently fall short in practice. Now let's talk about how this is playing out politically. In Minnesota, the federal deployment of ICE agents, labeled Operation Metro Surge, has been met with resistance from local officials, including Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison, who has pushed back hard against cooperation agreements. President Trump's appointed border czar, Tom Homan, has said he would consider scaling back the operation, but only if local authorities agree to broader collaboration. Across the country, grassroots movements are mobilizing. A national ICE out strike and coordinated protests are being planned for the coming days, demanding broader systematic changes, including calls to defund or dismantle ICE entirely. Local leaders are also speaking out. In Texas, the Harris County Commissioners recently passed a motion condemning the Department of Homeland Security's immigration enforcement tactics as a threat to civil liberties and public safety. But the deaths themselves, every one of them, should be the center of this conversation. Because focusing only on the two high-profile killings risks burying more than half the story. It risks sanitizing the day-to-day human toll of detention and enforcement. And it erases the humanity of the people who, before they died, were someone's parent or cousin or child or neighbor or coworker or whatever. There's a deep irony here. We live in a country that demands narratives of innocence before we recognize suffering. We want a backstory that fits neatly into our little worldview. We want to choose who we grieve. But that's not justice. Justice recognizes all the losses, not just the ones that are easiest for us to empathize with. So as we discuss policy, as we debate funding, as we argue about enforcement priorities and oversight, remember this. Behind every statistic is a life that someone loved. Behind every vague official statement is a family who is demanding answers and very often not getting them. Behind every reported heart complication or suicide or use of force is a story that deserves scrutiny. And if we truly care about justice at all, about humane policy, about transparency, about accountability, then we cannot let our compassion just be selective. We can not only care about the deaths that make comfortable headlines. We must care about all of the deaths, and we must demand answers for each and every one. Because when a system treats some deaths as noteworthy and others as forgettable, it's not just flawed, it's failing humanity. Once again, I want to thank everybody for taking time to listen to this installment of Back Porch Files from your neighbor on the left. I'd love to hear from you, and now there's a new way for you to figure out how to do that. The podcast now has a website. If you go to www.neighborontheleft.com, you'll find not only a contacts page that has information with how to get in touch with the podcast, but there is also a blog feature where we are starting to upload posts that reflect each successive episode. And there is a built-in web player where you can listen to or download any of the episodes of the podcast since the beginning. So I hope everyone will take a minute and stop by there and drop a line and let me know how you're enjoying the podcast, or if you're not enjoying the podcast, or if there are things you'd like to hear me talk about on the podcast. I'll be back on Tuesday with another full episode of Your Neighbor on the Left. So until then, stay engaged, stay kind, and have the kind of week you'd wish for others.